Boys and girls, welcome to our neighborhood family meeting. Today, we're going to start with a storybook called Winston and George. This book is written in a personifying way about the friendship between a crocodile and a bird. Can you tell us what is personifying?
Personifying is a figure of speech where non-living objects or animals are described to seem like people in a storybook.
Yes, thank you. So please pay attention to the story because we will have trivia questions afterwards.
Winston and George by John Miller and illustrated by Giuliano Cucco.
Along a sleepy river deep in the jungle, there once lived a very, very patient crocodile called Winston. Now, this crocodile and a crocodile bird named George were especially good friends, and they spent each day together out on the river fishing. George would perch on the very tip of Winston's snout, looking into the water for fish, and the moment he spied out, he would shout,
"Dive!"
Winston would then plunge deep while George hovered in the air, waiting for his friend to come to the surface with a nice fish between his jaws. Then they would go ashore where they enjoyed many a delicious meal together. George, however, had a very bad habit of playing pranks. One day, while Winston was dozing with his neighbors, George flew over and yelled,
"Danger! Danger!"
The crocodiles immediately plunged into the river. For crocodiles always believe warning from crocodile birds. They made a huge splash, which delighted George greatly. When nothing happened, the crocodiles swam ashore and demanded,
"Just what danger did you see?"
I thought I saw a danger prowling through the jungle. Dangerous danger. Very scary, dangerous danger.
The crocodiles grumbled that he wasn't telling the truth. And the oldest and meanest snapped his jaws with a great clattering of teeth and warned,
"A crocodile bird that plays pranks deserves to be eaten up."
One afternoon, when the jungle was so steamy and hot that Winston had to take his nap in the water, George once again couldn't resist a prank and pushed his friend straight out into the middle of the river. Winston woke up 3 miles downstream. When he finally got home after swimming all night against the current, the other crocodiles laughed and said,
"This will teach you to be patient. Why don't you just eat up that bird as we told you to do?"
The thought of fishing alone out on the river without George made Winston too sad to even answer. Then one early morning when they were out fishing, George looked down from Winston's snout and spotted a shoal of soft mud on the bottom of the river. Once again, he couldn't resist a prank.
Dive! Dive!
George shouted. Down Winston dove, but instead of a fish, he found his snout stuck firmly in the mud. It was very funny at first to see a crocodile's feet and tail kicking and wagging in the air, but when George realized that his friend was stuck, he grew frightened. He flew around and around, first to the hippopotamuses and then to the crocodiles. But no one offered to pull his friend from the mud. Instead, they laughed and said this was what he deserved for all his pranks. George flew back to his struggling friend. He tickled him, hoping that would help him to wiggle free. But Winston had lost all his patience and being tickled only made him angrier. Then, suddenly, his legs stopped kicking, and his tail stopped wagging and began to droop and droop and droop. Soon the crocodiles and hippos swam over to see what the commotion was all about.
"We'll pull your friend out, but only if you promise to stand inside his jaws and be gobbled up as you deserve."
I don't care if he gobbles me up. Please, please, please save him.
"Very well,"
they said, and the crocodiles and the hippos made a long chain and began to pull. They tugged and tugged until, with one final yank, Winston flew over their heads and landed on the far shore. They all crowded about. As soon as Winston had recovered, one of the crocodiles said,
Now that we've pulled you out of the mud and saved your life, aren't you going to gobble up that bird of yours?
Winston blew mud from his nostrils and answered,
Why, of course I'm going to gobble him up.
And this pleased them all very much. Winston opened his huge jaws while the others urged George on.
Go on in, as you promised. Climb in. Don't keep him waiting.
Reluctantly, George stepped over Winston's sharp teeth and stood inside, waiting for his end to come. Winston snapped his jaws shut. He then made a swallowing sound from deep down in his throat and stomach, followed by a loud burp. Once again, this pleased them all very much. Then, when the last crocodile and the last hippopotamus had waddled back to the river, Winston opened his jaws, and there was George, alive as ever, save on his friend's soft tongue. George stepped from Winston's mouth and thanked him again and again. And from that day on, George didn't play any more pranks on his patient crocodile, although he was tempted to many, many times. Did you pay attention to the story? Here are some trivia questions.
What is Winston's most noticeable characteristics?
What kind of bird is George? What is George good at?
What is George's bad habit?
Can you list the pranks that George played?
What does a crocodile bird that plays pranks on others deserve according to the oldest crocodile?
In the story, did Winston ever get mad after a prank and want to stop being friends with George?
How did George finally get hippos and the crocodiles agree to help him get Winston out of the mud?
Did Winston actually gulp George up? If so, why?
So what can we learn from the story? Here is a list of what we saw in a precious friendship between a crocodile and a bird. You want to share with us?
Sure. The first one is patience. The second one is forgiveness. And the third one is self-control.
Self-control means being able to put away any impulse to react quickly when being provoked in a situation, right? Okay, what's the next one?
Number 4 is endurance.
Oh, endurance. That is the ability to put up with limitations, sufferings, or hardships.
5 is the last one. It's love.
What is love? Can you think of examples from the story? Patience, forgiveness, self-control, endurance, and love. All these remind me of a very important character trait, forbearance, which is today's topic. It is pronounced as forbearance. Have you heard of it? Do you agree that Winston is a very good example of forbearance? I think the cat is forbearing you. Can you put him down? Please. Okay. Can you think of people around you that are good examples of forbearance?
Perhaps a family member, a teacher, a friend, a church member, community service people.
Let me ask you, who needs to have forbearance? What do you think? The answer is every one of us needs to have forbearance. Adults need forbearance, so do children. So in the New Testament, Jesus was mistreated by his own people time after time, but he continued to care for them, to preach the gospel to them, and to heal their sickness. So if you read the New Testament, you will find so many forbearance examples of Jesus. So as children of the Lord, what do you think? We also should follow Jesus, our pattern. Here is today's verse. Let's all read it together.
Colossians 3:13, bearing one another and forgiving one another, even as the Lord forgave you, so also should you forgive.
Let's read together again.
So for this week, let's have a little homework. Next time, when one of your family members bothers you, especially a sibling, remind yourself of the forbearance of Jesus before you react. Let's sing a song called I Love My Brother. This is a good song that will remind us to love each other, love our sibling, and show forbearance to one another.
I love my brother.
Remember forbearance.
Let's sing it again.
This week, let's show forbearance toward others. Let's bear one another in love by showing patience and by forgiving others. Thank you. See you next time.